The Mercy of Vesper drifted on half-power through the ragged shoal of debris above the twilight side of Earth. Her hull was scorched the way old bones are yellowed. A hospital ship was supposed to seem harmless, and the Vesper leaned into that illusion, hatches yawning, navigation lights flickering like the pulse of a sedated patient. Inside, orderlies whispered across dim corridors, and wounded refugees coughed in their hammocks. Somewhere, a child hummed a lullaby no one had the heart to finish. Leora Tessian walked those corridors in the crisp white scrubs of a senior triage nurse, though nothing in her posture said nurse. She moved with the silent cadence of someone who counted steps as a habit. 6 between bulkheads, 11 to the port observation blister, 20 to the port, from her berth to the secret hatch behind Cold Smist, where the old CIC lay gutted. Every rhythm was a map for escape if the Dominion ever boarded. She was Earth's last psionic commando. A decade earlier, when the Directorate still flew its blue banners, the commandos had launched from hidden catapults under the Andes, catching enemy admirals in their own dreams and turning palace walls into thought glass. Then the Dominion unfurled the Trine Code, a lattice of null fields and wetware inhibitors that bled the Directorate dry. Leora's cohort died one by one, hypercognition burning them out, or Dominion Inquisitors netting their minds for data. Leora alone remained, her name buried in the casualty lists, her presence scrubbed so completely that even sympathetic systems flagged her DNA as deceased. Mercy of Vesper, a wandering ambulance granted free passage by century-old treaties, was her last hiding place. Outside, the flame-pale dagger of the Dominion flagship Imperious Light slid into geosynchronous position. Its belly opened, revealing an orchard of mirror wings. Orbital glassers capable of painting continents into pumice. Earth's cradle cities had revolted again. Quito first, then Nairobi, then Shenzhen. And the Dominion's answer was always the same: white-hot rain until the rebellion's bones were glass. In 6 standard hours the mirror wings would align, and the only warning Earth would receive were the shadows of its own mountains vaporizing. If Leora could break the Dominion's psionic battle net before the countdown reached 0, the light would falter. But the Trine Code meant she couldn't strike alone. The Dominion's Mindlink Legion, the choir exalted, numbered 50 savants, 50 mentats bound to one another, thinking in chords, feeling in chords, dreaming in chords. To invade them was to walk into an ocean riptide, each current dragging a different direction at once, and she would have to do it from here, her body lying head down on a medcot, while her consciousness sprinted the astral plane. She palmed the hidden panel opposite cold death. Metal whispered aside, exposing a compartment no broader than a coffin. A single folded field chair sat inside, its cushioning hollowed to accept sensors. She unfolded it, knelt, and let the door seal behind her. Light vanished, replaced by the faint buzz of recycled air, a chirp from her wrist. There was only one person on the Vesper who knew her secret, Dr. Asha Kumar, chief surgeon and nominal captain. "You've got 5 hours, 18 minutes, Asha said through the encrypted implant in Leora's middle ear. "If the choir feels your incursion, they'll trace the resonance back to your tissues, and then to the ship. If they feel me at all, it won't matter. We'll be dead or free." "Try for the second option," Asha whispered. "I've got 200 patients who'd like that." With no more ceremony than a sigh, Leora slid the induction needles into the base of her skull. Liquid ice spread under her scalp. Her heart stuttered, recalibrated. She closed her eyes. The corridor silence faded behind her like a door closing on a funeral. Drop into the astral was never gentle. One moment Leora was taste, nerve, muscle. The next she was awareness without border. The plane unfolded as a tessellation of raw cognition. Color that felt like chimes, gravity that sang. She oriented by memory tricks. Red is east, tremor, hum is up. A bubble of self so she wouldn't dissolve. Far above the choir exalted, glimmered. A cathedral of braided light strands, each thread a Dominion savant. They floated around Imperious Light in a mandala, feeding tactical and moral data to every gunnery AI along the fleet. Through them, the Admiral could feel Quito's riot smoke, Nairobi's chant, Shenzhen's refusal to kneel. Through them, the Admiral would know the exact microsecond to ignite the mirror wings. 50-1, Leora murmured, though murmur here meant sculpting private color into the bubble's membrane. Lucky odds. She couldn't outgun them, but all Dominion conditioning, however sophisticated, relied on axioms, base truths that anchored a psyche. The choir's bonds were welded by two such axioms, dogma and certainty. If she could infect one axiom with doubt, the choir's harmony would fracture. Like feedback in a speaker loop, the echo might pulverize the battlenet, and doubt for a weaponized empath was easy to seed. She threaded closer, weaving past gossamer crossbeams of glinting data. The moment she touched the quiet's perimeter, their attention snapped toward her, 50 faces carved from light, identical in posture and triune sigils blazing on their brows. A voice echoed, not one voice but the stack of them pressed together. Intrusion. Identify. Mercy, Leora answered, letting the word be a perfume of solace, as if she were a drifting angel rather than a knife. I heard pain. I came. False parameter. Mercy is not authorized. Leave anomaly, she responded with memory. Projection in the astral had power measured not in electrons, but in conviction. Leora conjured a field hospital after a shelling, wet stone, antiseptic sting, a child with tourniquet too tight so his leg grew a purple halo. The memory wasn't invented. It was her first mission in Ethiopia, long before the directorate fell. She inhaled the trauma and exhaled it into the choir's radius. The reaction was immediate. Several threads flickered. The melodies that bound them thinned. Individual voices buckled under the weight of empathy, glimpsing faces they were trained to call enemy, but now seen as patients. But the choir adapted faster than she feared. Their collective will hardened, forging a wall of mirrored hexagons that reflected her memory back at her, sharpened to knife. She felt the wounds a second time, this time as the amputee, the mother screaming, the triage nurse with no morphine left. Her bubble shuttered, threatening to rupture. She pivoted to her second tool, humor. Not slapstick, which fell flat in combat, but the absurdism of cosmic scale. She invited the choir to behold themselves, 50 robed demigods orbiting a planet whose blue veins were the cradle of their species, ready to burn it clean because some bureaucrat's spreadsheet favored sterility over dialogue. Into this she laced the image of Admiral Cassandor, the Dominion's iron idol-wearing bunny slippers that squeaked during staff meetings. A tremor of stifled laughter quaked the choir's formation. Laughter, the psychological opposite of fear, wobbled their unity. For a bright second she thought the feedback might begin. But humor, too, can be turned. The choir pivoted into cruelty, projecting every directorate city they'd reduced to ash. They made her watch Niamey vanish under a glass hemisphere. Sydney's harbor flash-boiled. Mexico City cracked like overfilled ceramic. They showed Tommy Ibarra, her bunkmate at Academy, stumbling outward from a shattered bunker, hands cupping intestines before a Dominion drone snipped the last thread of his life. They narrated each memory in voices of honey-teasing, pitying, supreme. That cruelty sliced deeper than she expected. Sailors screamed inside her mind's ear. Another hospital, this one underwater. The screams blurry with bubbles, she faltered. An alarm scratched at the edge of her consciousness. A real-world ping from Asha. 4 hours left, heart rate spiking. Working, Leora replied. She needed leverage stronger than empathy, stronger than humor. The third tool in any commando's kit, paradox. Logic knots big enough to crash an AI or a human gestalt. She recomposed herself, crystallized her presence into a blade tip, and surged into the choir's lattice. Past the mirrored hexagons, she found the core, a rose knot of axioms coded in mnemonic glyphs. She seized the largest glyph, Sir Dainty, and inverted it. To invert an axiom is to question the questioner. She flooded them with scenarios where Dominion principle and Dominion practice clashed. A pacification officer hesitating because the rebel he's about to shoot wears the necklace his daughter wore. A data auditor suppressing casualty reports because the numbers would upset investors. An admiral calculating that orbital glassing cost less than ground negotiation, yet feeling the giddy shame of choosing the cheaper genocide. She didn't merely show the contradictions. She made the choir live them, heartbeat to heartbeat. The rose knot convulsed. Light threads snapped, releasing shards of midnight. But the choir had one defense she could never duplicate: unity. As individuals fractured, the remainder cannibalized their own doubt, metabolized it into righteousness, and blasted it back as a lance of concentrated will. It struck Leora squarely. Pain in the astral was metaphor turned physical. The lance punched through her self-bubble and threw her across cognitive vacuum. She ricocheted off memory walls, each impact reviving some dormant grief. Her sister's voice calling across a minefield. The smell of burnt rubber in collapsed tunnels. She spun, unmoored. Then a second presence cupped her cheek. Asha. Not physically, the surgeon had no psionic training, but through the ship's neural mesh, the doctor piped in music that Leora loved. An old Earth hymn sung by miners in 8-part harmony. The melody braided with percussion of heartbeat monitors, the hiss of respirators, the hush of quiet hands dressing wounds. It reminded Leora why she fought, not to hurt the choir, but to save this gentleness. The hymn became her anchor. She righted herself, knit the blown edges of her bubble, and she understood the choir's secret. Unity was their strength, but unity made them a single target. If she could breach their harmonic center, the implosion would propagate faster than they could integrate the damage. She advanced, not with memories or jokes or paradoxes, but with stillness. Absolute, ocean floor quiet, a black marble of focus. She offered the choir silence, refused every attempt they made to read her intentions, gave them nothing to harmonize against. The choir's lattice pulsed, seeking purchase. When they leaned their collective ear inward, she whispered a seed. The seed was a question so small it could hide in a neuron's fold. What if we are wrong? She didn't spike it with horror or guilt. She left it plain, unthreaded a splinter. It landed in one savant first, a junior acolyte whose mind signature tasted of chamomile and broken glass. The splinter lodged, vibrated. He reached to his neighbor for reassurance, but along the connective tissue the splinter traveled, duplicating. Each new host felt the bare metallic chill of uncertainty and flinched, passing it on. Leora retreated, nursing the silence. In moments the lattice flickered like a city's power grid during a quake. Cord segments lost sync. Commands misrouted. Somewhere on the physical plane, alarms must be screaming on the Imperious Lights bridge. The choir, in desperation, tried to quarantine the doubt. They collapsed formation into a sphere, pulling cognitive threads tight until their minds nearly fused into one. Any splinter, they reasoned, would be diluted by the sudden mass. That was the moment she'd waited for. Unity was a single point of failure. With their boundaries flattened, there was no longer a lattice to chase, just a collective mind pulsing like a star. Leora gathered every shard of banished pain, every echo of laughter, every paradox half-chewed, and compacted them into a cometary spear. She threw. The spear pierced the star. Light burst out in petals of screaming color. 50 voices lost octave, crashed into static, and the battle net went dark. She snapped back into her body like a parachute jerked open. Air filled her lungs in a gasp so violent she bit her tongue. The induction needles retracted automatically. Lights blared red along the coffin's seam, accompanied by Ash's voice. "You did something," the doctor said, half laugh, half sob. Dominion fleet signals just spiked off the charts, then flatlined. Their glassers are drifting. Whatever you broke it good. Leora coughed coppery taste, wiped her mouth. Any sign they're spinning up backups? The fleets are arguing. We've intercepted at least 6 counter orders. No one's in charge over there. Looks like... mutiny? Of course. With the choir gone, the Admiral no longer had a moral leash on his officers. Some believed in the order, some doubted. The Empire would fracture along those lines, maybe for years, long enough for Earth to breathe. How long until they realized Mercy Vesper was the Vector? Leora asked. Vector? Asha snorted. Command thinks the choir overloaded itself. Psychic burnout. They're too proud to blame an ambulance. Relief nearly melted Leora to the deck. She stepped from the compartment and staggered. Asha caught her. All professional hands and underplayed worry. In the ward, patients leaned from bunks to stare through portholes at the celestial skirmish, now dissolving into chaos. Some cheered. Some wept. Asha's surgical interns tried not to look like they were crying. The child who hummed earlier had found a louder tune, a song about stars and cows and silver spoons. Leora found herself at a window. Imperious Light's mirror wings folded like poisoned orchids. Shuttle pods darted between destroyers, commanders shouting conflicting orders, and the Earth below, fragile and rebellious, turned on its axis, unaware that apocalypse had passed by a whisker. She thought of the choir-exalted 50 savants now huddled in their fleshly bodies, brains aflame with paradox. Some would recover. Some would flee the Dominion. A few might tear themselves apart. She felt no triumph, only the hush that followed a surgeon's successful cut, knowing the bleeding stopped, but the healing still ahead. A tug on her sleeve. The boy with the song stood barefoot, ivy line dangling from his wrist. "Nurse Tessian," he said, because that was who she was to them. "Are we safe now?" The truth was slippery. No one is ever safe forever. Empires regroup, wars return, and the mind can break in 100 unseen ways. But Leora knelt so their eyes met and answered with the only certainty she believed. "For tonight," she said, smoothing his hair. "Yes, tonight you are safe." Outside the viewport, dawn crawled across the rim of Earth. Light filled the ocean trenches, spilled over mountain crests, gilded the ragged edges of clouds. As the sun climbed, the shadow of imperious light shrank, and the Mercy of Vesper still, scarred, still drifting, turned quietly toward the brightening planet. Patient touched Leora's shoulder. "Patients need rounds," she reminded gently. Leora straightened. She was Earth's last psionic commando, ghost of a dead directorate, slayer of a legion that called itself a choir. But on this ship, she was also a nurse whose rounds included checking fluid bags and coaxing caregivers to nap. She felt the weight of that duality, decided it was a good weight, the kind that kept her anchored. She walked the ward, adjusting drips, listening to heartbeats, trading small jokes about the color of space. With each ordinary gesture, the astral plane receded, as if closing a door behind her. War would come again, but that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight was breathing, monitors, soft footsteps. A child's lullaby finally finished. And outside, Earth spun unglassed beneath a sky clearing of imperial fire alive, wounded, stubbornly luminous.